I was just a passenger, incognito, on the inaugural flight of the airline I'd built. But a gate agent's snap judgment and discriminatory actions quickly turned my quiet observation into a very public, very personal battle for respect. The low hum of 1,000 journeys is a sound you can feel in your bones. It's a symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and the quiet, desperate hope of people trying to get somewhere else. For me, that day, it was the sound of coming home. Ironic, considering I was leaving. I was seated in the plush navy blue priority seating at gate C-27, a steaming cup of Earl Grey warming my hands. I wasn't dressed like a CEO, not in the traditional sense. No sharp blazer, no pencil skirt. Just a simple cream-colored cashmere sweatsuit and a pair of comfortable but ridiculously expensive sneakers. It was my travel uniform, a small rebellion against the rigid persona I had to maintain from 9 to 5. Besides, today wasn't about being a CEO. It was about being a passenger. This flight was special. It was the inaugural international route for Aura Air, the airline I had built from the ground up over 7 grueling years. From a single leased plane flying domestic routes to a fleet of 50, we were finally crossing the Atlantic. I had insisted on flying this first trip as a regular first-class passenger, incognito. I wanted to see it through their eyes, the check-in, the lounge, the gate experience. I wanted to feel the soul of the company I had poured my life into. And so far, the soul felt pretty good. The lounge was impeccable, the staff courteous. Everything was running like the well-oiled machine I designed. I took a slow sip of my tea, a rare smile touching my lips as I watched families reuniting and business travelers prepping for meetings. This was what it was all about. That's when I first saw her, the gate agent. She was a woman in her late 50s, with hair pulled back into a bun so tight it seemed to be stretching the skin on her face. She moved with a clipped, officious energy, her eyes scanning the seating area like a hawk searching for a field mouse. Her gaze swept over the clusters of people, lingering for a moment on a young backpacker who had his feet up, before moving on. Then her eyes landed on me. They stopped. They narrowed. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was just doing her job, ensuring everyone was in the right place. I went back to my people watching, my mind drifting to the final merger documents I needed to review on the flight. But I could feel her stare. It was like a physical weight pressing on my shoulder. A few moments later, the telltale click-clack of sensible shoes on polished linoleum approached my seat. I looked up. "Excuse me, ma'am." Her voice was as starched as her uniform collar. "Yes?" I offered a polite, neutral smile. She didn't return it. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of my sweatsuit, from the collar down to my sneakers and then back to my face. "I'm going to have to ask you to move. This seating area is for first class and priority passengers only." The statement hung in the air, thick and unpleasant. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I kept my smile in place, though it felt a little stiffer now. "I understand," I said, my voice calm and even. I reached into my carry-on, pulled out my ticket folio, and presented the boarding pass. "I am in first class, seat 1A. She barely glanced at it. She waved a dismissive hand, as if the physical evidence of her ticket was an irritating fly. "That may be," she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, condescending tone. "But we have a high-profile passenger arriving shortly who has requested this specific seat by the window. We need to keep it clear." I knew for a fact that wasn't true. Our policy, a policy I myself had written, was clear. Priority seating is first come, first served for eligible passengers. There was no reserving of specific gate seats. She was lying. The question was, why? I looked around. The priority area was only about half full. There were several other empty seats, including another one right by the window. "There are other window seats available," I pointed out, my voice still level. I was collecting data now. This was no longer a relaxing anonymous trip. This was a quality control issue, a serious one. The agent's face tightened. A faint blotchy red started to creep up her neck. This is the seat that has been requested. Some passengers have specific needs. Her eyes flickered towards the general boarding area, a chaotic mess of people, and then back to me. The unspoken message was clear. You are in the way. You don't belong. A cold fury, slow and deliberate, began to solidify in my veins. I had faced down hostile boards, shoddy investors, and cutthroat competitors. I had fought tooth and nail for every scrap of respect in an industry dominated by old men. And here, in the terminal of my own airline, I was being told to move because of the color of my skin and the comfort of my clothes. She had taken one look at me, a black woman in a sweatsuit, and decided I was out of place. I took a slow breath, centering myself. "I'm quite comfortable here," I said, my voice dropping an octave. The politeness was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable firmness. Her jaw clenched. "Ma'am," she said, her voice rising in volume, attracting the attention of nearby passengers. "I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. You need to vacate this seat now. We can find you another spot over there." She gestured vaguely towards the packed, noisy general seating area. The whisper started. People were turning to look, their faces a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. A few phones were subtly raised. I could feel the heat of 100 pairs of eyes on me. This was the moment every black person, every woman, every minority who has ever been told they don't belong dread. You can shrink or you can stand. And I hadn't built an entire airline by shrinking. "No," I said, simply. My eyes met hers and held them. Her face went from red to a pale, furious white. "Right," she spat, her professionalism completely gone. She reached for the radio clip to her shoulder. "You've been warned. I am calling airport security. We will have you removed for being a disruptive passenger." My heart hammered against my ribs. Security? This could get ugly. It could mean missing the flight, missing the London meeting, creating a PR nightmare. All my work, all my planning for this perfect inaugural flight was about to go up in smoke at the hands of one bigoted employee. As her fingers fumbled with the radio, a door to the jet bridge swung open. A man in a crisp pilot's uniform stepped out. His silver-haired temples and authoritative posture commanded immediate attention. He was Captain Evans, one of my best. He took in the scene, the furious gate agent, me sitting ramrod straight, the sea of staring faces, and his brow furrowed in confusion. The gate agent saw him, and a look of triumphant relief washed over her face. She thought her backup had arrived. "Captain, thank goodness," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured distress. "This woman is refusing a direct order to vacate a priority seat. She's causing a disturbance, and I was just about to call security." Captain Evans's gaze shifted from the gate agent's triumphant face to mine. His professional mask faltered. His eyes widened, first in recognition and then in something that looked terrifyingly like panic. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Captain Evans's face was a canvas of warring emotions, recognition, disbelief, and a dawning gut-wrenching horror. The gate agent, whose name tag I could now read, Brenda, mistook his silence for indecision. She puffed out her chest, empowered by the presence of a man in uniform, completely misreading who held the real power in this little tableau. "Captain," she said again, her voice sharp with impatience, "are you going to let this person disrupt the boarding of your flight? We need to maintain order." Finally, Captain Evans found his voice. It came out as a strained rasp. "Brenda," he said, his eyes still locked on me, "what exactly is the problem here?" "The problem," Brenda huffed, gesturing at me as if I were a piece of luggage left in the walkway, "is that this passenger is refusing to move from a designated priority seat that is needed for another, more suitable guest. She is being belligerent and uncooperative." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just watched Captain Evans, a silent test passing between us. I had personally interviewed him for his promotion to senior captain for the international fleet. I remembered his file. Impeccable record, cool under pressure, respected by his crew. I was about to find out if that reputation was earned. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He finally broke eye contact with me and turned his full attention to Brenda. His entire demeanor shifted. The panic receded, replaced by the calm, unshakable authority of a man responsible for 300 souls at 30,000 feet. "Brenda, are you aware of Aura Air's priority seating policy?" he asked, his voice low and dangerously quiet. Brenda faltered for a second, thrown by the question. "Of course I am, Captain. It's for first-class passengers and is the passenger in question," he nodded towards me, "flying first class?" "Well, her ticket says so, but—" "There are no buts, Brenda," he cut her off, the steel in his voice making her recoil slightly. "If she has a first-class ticket, she is entitled to this seat. There is no policy for reserving specific gate seats for arriving passengers. You know this." A murmur went through the crowd of onlookers. They had heard Brenda's lie, and now they were hearing it be dismantled by the pilot himself. Brenda's face flushed a deeper, angrier red. Being contradicted so publicly was a blow to her petty tyranny. "With all due respect," she seethed, "this is a gate matter, not a cockpit matter. I am the final authority on the ground, and I have made my decision. She is being disruptive." She reached for her radio again, her fingers jabbing at the button. "This is Gate C-27 calling security. We have a non-compliant individual causing a disturbance. Assistance required immediately." Captain Evans closed his eyes for a brief moment, a flicker of profound disappointment crossing his face. He wasn't just disappointed in her. I knew he was disappointed that this was happening at our airline. His airline. My airline. He opened his eyes and looked at me again, a silent apology in his gaze. I gave him the slightest of nods. Handle it. 2 airport security officers arrived within a minute. They were young, professional, and had the weary expressions of people who dealt with airport drama all day. Brenda rushed to them, a torrent of accusations pouring from her lips. Uncompliant, causing a scene, security risk. The taller of the 2 officers approached me, his partner standing back slightly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice polite but firm, "I'm Officer Miller. We've received a report that you're refusing to cooperate with the gate agent. Is there a problem?" "The only problem, officer," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake, "is that this employee is attempting to enforce a policy that doesn't exist based on her own personal biases." "She's lying," Brenda shrieked from behind him. "She needs to be removed." Officer Miller held up a hand to silence her, not taking his eyes off me. "Ma'am, regardless of the details, the gate agent has the authority to deplane or deny boarding. If she's asking you to move, the simplest thing to do is cooperate. We can sort out the details later." "So your advice is for me to give in to harassment and discrimination?" I asked, raising a single eyebrow. The officer's expression tightened. He was in a tough spot, caught between airline authority and a potential civil rights complaint. "My advice, ma'am, is to avoid being arrested for trespassing. Once the gate agent declares you non-compliant, you are technically trespassing on airline-leased property." This was it, the final escalation, the point of no return. The entire gate area was silent, phones held high, recording every second. My inaugural flight was turning into a viral disaster. But then Captain Evans moved. He stepped directly between me and Officer Miller, placing himself as a physical barrier. His 6'2" frame seemed to fill the entire space. "That will not be happening," Officer said, his voice now booming with command. It was the voice he used to talk over jet engines and through crackling radios. It was the voice of God in this terminal. Brenda looked like she was about to explode. "Captain, you are undermining my authority. What are you doing?" Captain Evans ignored her completely. He turned, not to me, not to the officers, but to the gate podium. With 3 long strides, he was behind it. He leaned forward and pressed the button for the public address system. The electronic chime echoed through the gate area,
silencing the last of the whispers. Every eye was on him. Brenda stared, mouth agape, wondering what on earth he was about to do. He lifted the microphone to his lips, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, but landing with deliberate and profound respect right on me. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen." His voice, amplified and crystal clear, resonated through the terminal. "This is Captain Evans of Aura Air Flight 710 to London Heathrow. We'll be starting our pre-boarding process shortly. However, it seems we have a significant customer service issue that needs to be addressed publicly right here and now." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Brenda's face had gone from red to chalk white. She finally seemed to realize she had made a catastrophic error in judgment, but she had no idea how deep it went.
Captain Evans continued, his voice steady as a rock. "The gate agent on duty, Miss Brenda Peterson, has made a serious mistake. She has attempted to remove a passenger from a seat she is fully entitled to. A passenger who was not only a valued first-class customer." He paused again, a master of dramatic timing. His eyes were still locked on mine. "But is also the founder and CEO of this airline." A collective gasp rippled through the gate area. It was a physical sound, a sudden intake of 100 breaths at once. Phones that had been held tentatively were now thrust forward, recording with a renewed sense of purpose. The story had just taken a turn no one expected. Brenda Peterson, the gate agent, looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty, slack-jawed mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes, wide and disbelieving, darted from Captain Evans at the podium to me, sitting serenely in my cashmere sweatsuit, and back again. The gears in her mind were grinding, trying to reconcile the image of the powerful, faceless CEO she had likely heard of with the black woman she had just tried to have arrested. Captain Evans let the silence hang for a beat longer, allowing the full weight of his announcement to settle over the crowd like a heavy blanket. His gaze remained on me, a clear and public display of deference. He was not just correcting an employee. He was realigning the entire power dynamic of the situation for everyone to see. "To be clear," he continued, his amplified voice cutting through the stunned silence, "the woman Miss Peterson just threatened to have removed by security, the woman she accused of being a disruptive passenger, is Miss Imani Wright. She is the reason Aura Air exists. She is the reason we are all here today about to embark on this historic inaugural flight to London. She owns the plane we will be flying on, the seats you are sitting in, and the very ground this gate is built on." The melodrama was a little thick, but I appreciated the sentiment. He was making a point, loud and clear. This wasn't just an insult to a passenger. It was an insult to the entire company. A low murmur erupted among the other passengers. Faces that had been passive or annoyed were now filled with a different kind of energy, excitement, shock, and a fair bit of schadenfreude directed at the rapidly crumbling gate agent. Brenda finally snapped out of her stupor. That's not possible," she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy whisper that was completely lost in the cavernous space. She can't be." Captain Evans lowered the microphone, but didn't release the button, his thumb holding it down as he turned his piercing gaze directly on her. "Do you think I would make something like this up, Brenda?" he asked, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable threat. "Do you think I don't know who signs my paycheck?" Security Officer Miller and his partner exchanged a look. They subtly took a half-step back, creating distance between themselves and Brenda. They had gone from managing a disruptive passenger to witnessing a corporate execution. Their job was suddenly much, much simpler. Stay out of the way. I decided it was time to stand. I moved slowly, deliberately, folding my newspaper and placing it in my carry-on before rising to my feet. Every eye followed my movement. The hush returned.
I walked the few steps to the podium, my ridiculously expensive sneakers making no sound on the floor. I stopped next to Captain Evans, who dipped his head in a gesture of respect and offered me the microphone. I took it, its cool metal of familiar weight in my hand. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the phones pointed at me, and finally, I let my eyes land on Brenda. She flinched as if I had physically struck her. She looked small and pathetic, her carefully constructed authority stripped away, leaving only her raw, ugly prejudice exposed for all to see. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, my voice calm and clear, carrying easily through the PA system. "My name is Imani Wright, and yes, I am the CEO of Aura Air. Captain Evans is correct. I founded this airline 7 years ago with a simple mission: to provide an exceptional travel experience built on a foundation of respect. Respect for our customers, respect for our employees, and respect for the simple human dignity of every person who chooses to fly with us." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over Brenda once more. It is a mission that, clearly, some of our staff have forgotten. Brenda opened her mouth, a desperate plea forming on her lips. "Miss Wright, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I was just trying to—" "You were just trying to what, Miss Peterson?" I cut her off, my voice turning to ice. "Trying to enforce a non-existent policy? Trying to intimidate a passenger based on their appearance? You saw a black woman in a sweatsuit and you made an assumption. You assumed I didn't belong. You didn't look at my ticket. You didn't listen when I told you my seat number. You looked at my face and decided I was less than. You decided I was unworthy of the seat I paid for, unworthy of the respect afforded to every other passenger in this area." Tears began to well in her eyes, the desperate, self-pitying tears of someone who has been caught. "No, that's not it, I swear." "Don't," I said, my voice sharp and final. The sound of it made her snap her mouth shut. "Do not add insult to injury by lying to my face. I'm not interested in your excuses. I'm interested in accountability." I turned my attention away from her, addressing the crowd again, and, more importantly, the dozens of employees who were now watching from nearby gates. Let me be unequivocally clear to every single employee of Aura Air. Discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated. Not on my planes, not at my gates, not in my company. We are better than this. I demand that we are better than this. I looked at Captain Evans. "Captain, please begin pre-boarding for families and passengers requiring special assistance." Then I turned to the 2 security officers. "Officers, thank you for your prompt response. Your services will no longer be required here." They nodded, clearly relieved, and melted back into the airport crowds. Everything was moving again. The spell was broken. Families started gathering their things, a sense of normalcy returning. But the tension was still thick around the gate podium. I handed the microphone back to Captain Evans and turned to face Brenda. Her face was ashen, streaked with mascara from her tears. The fight was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading terror. "Miss Wright, please," she begged, her voice now a choked whisper. "It was a misunderstanding, a mistake. I have been with this airline for 15 years, since before it was Aura Air. Please don't fire me. I have a family." "So do I, Brenda," I said quietly, thinking of the company I had birthed and nurtured. "This airline is my family, and you just brought shame upon it in the most public way imaginable." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number from my contacts. "Yes, hello, it's Imani. I'm at gate C27 at JFK. I need you to get HR on the line and connect them with the head of ground operations immediately. We have a personnel issue."
Brenda's breath hitched in a sob. She knew what was coming. The entire gate area knew. This was the end of her career. But as I stood there, phone to my ear, watching the first of my happy, unsuspecting passengers walk down the jet bridge for my triumphant inaugural flight, I felt a new, cold dread creep into my heart. Brenda was a symptom, not the disease. How deep did this rot go? How many other passengers, without my power and my platform, had been treated this way? The problem wasn't just Brenda, it was bigger. And as I looked at the crew manifest in Captain Evans's hand, a sudden, terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. The flight attendant supervisor for this flagship route, the one responsible for setting the tone for the entire in-flight crew, was a name I recognized. It was Brenda's sister. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Brenda's sister? Of course. Nepotism was a cancer in any organization, but coupled with this kind of ingrained prejudice, it was a ticking time bomb. The in-flight supervisor, Karen Peterson, was known for being difficult. I'd seen a few minor complaints cross my desk over the years, reports of her being curt with passengers, overly strict with junior flight attendants, but nothing that warranted termination. I had chalked it up to the stress of the job. Now I saw it in a new, sinister light. It wasn't just a bad attitude, it was a pattern. The Peterson sisters had carved out their own little fiefdom of misery here at JFK. Brenda controlled the ground, Karen controlled the air, and heaven help any passenger who didn't fit their narrow, prejudiced worldview. My call with HR was brief and brutally efficient. Brenda was to be immediately suspended pending a full investigation, her system access revoked. She was to be escorted from the premises. No scene, no fuss, just a quiet surgical removal. As I ended the call, a ground operations manager arrived, his face pale and sweating. He took one look at me, at Brenda's tear-streaked face, and understood. He led her away, her shoulders slumped in defeat, the clicks of her sensible shoes fading down the corridor for the last time. The crowd of passengers watched her go with a cold, detached satisfaction. Justice, in this case, had been swift. But my problem wasn't solved. It was now 30,000 feet in the air, waiting for me. I couldn't allow Karen Peterson to supervise this flight. Not this flight, not any flight. The inaugural journey was meant to be a showcase of Aura Air's best, our commitment to service, comfort, and respect. Letting Karen run the cabin would be a betrayal of that promise before we even left the ground. I turned to Captain Evans, who was overseeing the final boarding procedures with a grim, focused expression. "Captain," I said, my voice low, "we have another problem, the flight attendant supervisor." He glanced at the manifest in his hand, and his eyes widened slightly as he made the same connection I had. "Peterson," he breathed, "Brenda's sister." "Exactly," I said. "I can't have her on this flight. I won't. It sends the wrong message. It compromises the entire operation." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Agreed, but who can replace her? We're minutes from closing the door. Pulling her would mean finding a replacement on standby, which could cause a significant delay. The press and the VIPs on board won't like that." He was right. A delay on our first ever international route would be a PR black eye. The story would shift from CEO stands up to bigoted employee to new airline's flagship flight delayed due to internal chaos. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "I won't be delayed," I said, a new plan already forming in my mind. The old saying goes, if you want something done right, you do it yourself. You have a full crew in the cabin, correct? Minus the supervisor. "Yes," he confirmed. 3 flight attendants for first class, 6 for economy. They're all excellent." "Good," I said. "Then they won't need a supervisor. They'll have something better." I looked him straight in the eye. "They'll have the owner." Captain Evans blinked, processing my words. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen on him all day. "Ms. Wright," he said, with a newfound admiration in his voice, "it would be an honor to have you on my crew." "The honor is all mine, Captain," I replied. I walked down the jet bridge, my heart pounding with a strange mix of anger and exhilaration. As I stepped onto the aircraft, I was met by a flight attendant who immediately recognized me. Her eyes went wide with panic, no doubt having heard the commotion from the gate.
"Ms. Wright, welcome aboard," she stammered. "Thank you," I said, putting her at ease. "Could you please ask the flight supervisor, Karen Peterson, to meet me in the forward galley? Immediately."
A moment later, Karen appeared. She looked just like her sister, the same tight bun, the same pinched expression of perpetual disapproval. She saw me and her face soured, clearly annoyed that a passenger was in her galley. She hadn't heard the news yet. "Ma'am, you need to take your seat," she said dismissively, not even making eye contact as she fiddled with a coffee maker. "I will," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "But first, you're going to deplane." Her head snapped up, her eyes flashing with indignation. "Excuse me? Who do you think you are?" "I am Imani Wright," I said, letting my name hang in the air between us. Unlike with her sister, the name didn't immediately register. To her, I was just another inconvenient passenger. "And as of this moment, your employment with my airline is suspended, pending termination. Your sister has already been escorted from the airport. Now you will gather your belongings and get off my plane." Recognition finally dawned in her eyes, followed by the same panicked disbelief I had seen on Brenda. "You're the CEO?" she whispered. "But why?" "Your sister decided to publicly harass me and tried to have me arrested because she didn't like the color of my skin or the clothes I was wearing," I explained calmly. "And I have a zero-tolerance policy for that kind of poison in my company. It stops now. It stops with you. Get off my plane." Karen stared at me, speechless. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a cold, hard understanding. It was over. Without another word, she turned, grabbed her small roller bag from the crew closet, and walked down the jet bridge, disappearing from view. I took a deep breath and turned to the stunned flight attendants who had witnessed the exchange. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, my voice now bright and full of energy. "My name is Imani, and it looks like I'll be your acting supervisor for our flight to London today. Now, who can get me an apron and show me where we keep the champagne? We have a historic flight to celebrate." For the next 7 hours, I worked. I poured champagne for the passengers in first class, personally thanking them for being part of our journey. I helped serve meals, I collected trays, I walked the aisles of economy, talking to families, business travelers, and students. I introduced myself not as the CEO, but as Imani, a member of the crew who wanted to ensure they had the best possible flight. I learned more about the soul of my company in those 7 hours than I had in the past 7 years. I saw the dedication of my flight attendants, the gratitude of my passengers, and the quiet, seamless hum of the machine I had built, operating exactly as it should. When we landed at Heathrow, as the passengers deplane, many of them stopped to shake my hand. "Best flight I've ever been on," one man said. "I've never seen a CEO do that," said another. The story had already gone viral, of course. My phone was blowing up with texts and news alerts. But the headlines weren't what mattered. What mattered was the feeling on that plane, the feeling of a problem being confronted and decisively solved, the feeling of respect being restored. As the last passenger left, Captain Evans came out of the cockpit. "Ms. Wright," he said, holding out his hand, "that was the smoothest inaugural flight in aviation history, on the ground and in the air." I shook his hand firmly. "It's what we do, Captain," I said with a smile. "It's what Aura Air is all about." As I finally walked off my plane and into the London morning, I knew this was more than just a good PR moment. It was a reset, a reminder to myself and a message to the world of what my airline stood for. It wasn't about the planes or the routes. It was about the people and the simple, unshakable belief that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. And sometimes you just have to roll up your sleeves or your cashmere sweatsuit and serve the champagne yourself.